Thank you so much for joining us this evening here at Smart Design. My name is David Russo. I am with the SDN NYC chapter. And I'd like to start by thanking Cameron and Smart Design for hosting us here this evening. It is always a juggling act trying to find the combination of a willing speaker and a willing venue. And when you have the two of them that come together, it makes our job a lot easier, so thank you. So again, I'm David with the SDN NYC. My co-conspirators, Barry, Casey, and Francesco are all here. Max, unfortunately, could not join us this evening. If you are here, that means you have found us in some way, which is a good thing. You can find us, on all the various socials. We are a volunteer-led chapter that is with the mission of raising awareness and helping networking and all of that around the field of service design. Typically, we host events monthly, again, based on when we can find a speaker and when we can find a venue. But if you have found us tonight, you'll find the schedule of events as they happen. Here's how you can find us, and if you are interested in getting involved, we'd love to have you, either as a speaker, as a host site, as a volunteer. We oftentimes do write-ups of the events and publish them to Medium. We post on the socials and look for people to help us do that. So if you're interested in getting involved in any way, find me afterwards, send me a message through Meetup, or find Casey and Francesco and Barry, and we'd love to have you. Some of the roles. If you're interested in, if your company is interested in being a sponsor in some way, we're always looking for that as well. So our agenda for the evening, you have already met and mingled over food. Cameron is going to present for roughly an hour, then we'll have more mingling and maybe some food and drink at the end. And then roughly at 8 or 8:30, I've heard, is when we all get the boot. So we'll leave then. So, Cameron Hanson, the strategy director here at Smart Design. She leads a multidisciplinary team who tackles human issues for big brands. She is an expert in design research and service design, and she uses her skills to understand people's needs and wants to create strategies for improved products and services. Notable clients include Capital One, Meta, Google, Harley-Davidson, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. She has an MFA in transdisciplinary design from Parsons, and Smart Design is an innovation and design consultancy based right here in the Navy Yard. I also had the pleasure of getting to see Cameron give this presentation at our SDN Global Conference in Berlin, which was fantastic. And she's been kind enough to offer it up again here. So without further ado. No, they said
I'll take the clicker.
Oh, you'll take the clicker, yeah. Right.
All right. Great. Good evening, everyone. I am Cameron here at Smart Design, and like David said, this is an encore presentation that I gave in Berlin last month. And before I jump into the topic of GenAI, I want to first just welcome you formally to Smart Design. We're in this building right now, and we are a full-service agency. So where I sit is strategy and research and insights and service design, but we also do industrial design and visual design and engineering and technology. And today, we are here to talk about generative AI, and sort of the reason for this topic, or the reason for this talk, is I was feeling the pressure of like, are you on the GenAI train or are you not? We just get such buzz about it everywhere we look. On LinkedIn, you're seeing like the 10 ways to use ChatGPT to maximize your efficiency or to change design. And I felt like most of the conversations I was having was at a very high level of how it's going to change the industry and change design. And I was like, I want to start on the ground level and see what can I learn in experimenting with GenAI, and that's exactly what I've done. So the question that I come to you with is, how can we actually apply generative AI in the design process? And when I say design process, I'm specifically coming at it as a design researcher. And in thinking through, okay, that's a big question, how shall I attack this? I was thinking about where in the design process, I'm using the double diamond here just for simplicity. I was thinking about where is there friction as a researcher in the design process. So one of them is, especially as a consultant, when you're at the beginning of a project, you're swimming in information trying to understand what is this world that I'm trying to help my client solve a problem for, or help them understand who they're trying to serve. So maybe GenAI can help getting up to speed at the beginning of a project when you're trying to understand what people's needs are. Another area is when you've conducted research and you have so much information and you're swimming in that data trying to make sense of it and what is the most important thing to do with it. And then when you're generating ideas, and how can maybe generative AI help with that ideation process. So what I did is I ran with my colleagues here at Smart Design 3 scrappy experiments to test some of these questions. And by scrappy, I mean we used tools that we had access to. So ChatGPT, Bard, Midjourney, we weren't paying for any major subscriptions. It was like, what do I have access to? What can I learn right now? And the 3 particular tests, the first one was, how can we use synthetic users to strengthen our understanding of our participants? So a synthetic user here is when GenAI represents a user. So it's not real, it's synthetic. But I wanted to see, people are talking about synthetic users, what is the buzz about, and can I learn anything from it? Second, GenAI has incredible powers to query large documents all at once, and when I'm swimming in data and research, maybe there could be something there that we could learn. And finally, text-to-image GenAI. I had a question or a thought, maybe it could help jumpstart ideation and change that process for us at Smart. So I'm going to go through the 3 experiments and talk through some of my learnings, and then at the end, we'll open it up to any questions that you have. So this first one about synthetic users, the way I set it up is we had already conducted a research project where one of the questions that we were asking real humans was how they use technology for their health and wellness. So we had interviewed lots of people. We knew what they had said. We knew some of the emotions that were bubbling up. We had synthesized the information. So then the experiment is, all right, I'm going to take the same questions I asked to humans, and I'm going to ask them to a synthetic user and then compare results. So I used Bard, and what I did is I said, pretend I'm conducting a user interview. I'm going to ask you questions about how you use technology for your health and wellness. Let me describe who you are. So then I just, in a few sentences, gave it a description of this is the type of person you are. And in this case, it's someone who is very on top of their health, and they see the interconnectedness of their diet and their sleep and their exercise. And then I immediately started asking it the questions that I had asked humans. So here's some of them that I just literally put in a list. And for most of you who I assume have dabbled in some way with ChatGPT or Bard, the answers were so easy to read. They were immediately accurate. Like, yes, these are the responses that I heard in research, and it was easy to scan. And then I started to engage with it like I would an interview. So one of the statements here, the synthetic user, says that they keep a journal of their sleep. So it's like, ooh, I want to learn more about this sleep journal. So I asked it follow-up questions like you would a user interview. And the responses that I was getting, they were accurate, but nothing was feeling special or unique or emotive in the responses, but they were in the vein that I had understood at a broad level from my research with actual humans. And then I, asked it more about this sleep journal, and then it was giving me these exhaustive answers that I'm like, really, would one person be doing all of these things? So it started to feel unrealistic how it was answering questions. So I decided, all right, let me change up who the user is and see if I get different results if I describe the user in a different way. So then I said, thank you, Bard. Now I'm going to switch you up. You're going to be someone who struggles with their health. They're in denial that they need any help. They don't want to address their health. And then when I asked some of the same questions, the answers actually felt very unrealistic, because I just said, you don't do much for your health. And then it says, I do a meditation app and a mood tracking app and a therapy app and an online support group. And it was helpful for me to know that those are ways to track your health, but it did not reflect what someone who struggles or is in denial of their health might respond. So these were definite indicators that this is not what would be realistic. And in all of this, there was no emotion, there was nothing that surprised me, there were no anecdotes that, as researchers, those are the juicy moments that you're after. You're like, ooh, this is this nugget that really summarizes for me what this tension is. And it became very clear. I had followed up they were talking about a smartwatch, so I said, okay, what kind of smartwatch do you have? And it responded, I don't have a physical smartwatch, I am a large language model. So just, right there, they are not human and they do not have a lived experience. So what did I learn from this? I think there is value in using ChatGPT or Bard as a synthetic user, but where I see the value is it can help you get up to speed faster when you're not yet versed in a topic, or maybe you have the questions of a discussion guide that you want to take into research. Use it, have the conversation, and maybe use the answers as a way to understand, okay, these are the types of responses I might get, or I can think about framing my synthesis in this way, but in no way, just from this little experiment that I did, do I want to substitute this research with actual humans, because it was just so far from what a person would give me. So I'm ending in a little metaphor in each of these sections. How I see GenAI in this situation is GenAI is that sounding board. When you want to figure out what question should I ask, what words should I use, does this language make sense? Bard or ChatGPT or any large language model could be your friend there. All right, next, Smart Design recently published a report on healthcare innovation, and two of our colleagues, and Kate is walking around here somewhere, they interviewed 21 different leaders in the healthcare and innovation space. And after they had conducted the research, we then wanted to test what might have been possible if we had used some document queries, and I'll explain in a little more what exactly that means. So the first step of their experiment is they conducted research in ways that many of you are familiar with. They interviewed 21 people, they took notes, they recorded transcriptions, and then they went into Trusty Miro and they synthesized what they had learned, pulling up, these are some of the themes, these are some of the patterns. And then simultaneously, we were working with a writer to also do the same process. So these are 3 human brains making sense of what we had learned. And then a project manager helped sort of pose the question, what more could we learn if we used an open source, OpenAI API to understand what we had learned? So what they did, they scrubbed all of their notes and transcripts and then uploaded it to this local server so that there is data security, and were able to ask it specific questions. And by it, I'm saying 148 pages of notes and transcripts. So this represents all of the notes from the research. And one of the ways that they were able to query it is it gave summaries per document. And I think my understanding is they used this as just a little like, yep, this is what I learned. Is there anything that I'm missing? Does anything feel out of sorts? They gave feedback that in these key takeaways here, they're not all the same weight, that they might say that this particular interview, they talked about challenges in integrating qualitative and quantitative data, but then it also lists some bio information of the person they interviewed, and those aren't at the same sort of I mean, they're just not all of the information that it summarizes and brings to the surface is relevant for this project. But it doesn't know that. It's just giving you a straightforward summary. Where there was a little more, definitely a little more value, was querying specific questions. So by querying, it means to this database of documents, they asked questions. So one of them was, what is the perspective of US healthcare currently? And then it spit out, in a matter of seconds, a summary paragraph, and it includes sources, the way that this was set up. So while this is not only a good gut check of like, does this align with what they had understood, they can actually go back to the sources and understand a little more deeply. So it's not taking all of the human work away, but it is sort of the shortcut to go double check things. And with other questions as well, they were able to ask that. And some of the ways that it was not helpful is that it did not sense a lot of the nuance of these conversations. So when someone said something, but it was in a joke, whether they were kidding or they were trying to, tell some sort of nuanced story that a human is going to be able to pick up, it was not sensing any of that. Similarly, they found that the queries were over-indexing on certain words. So when if someone said, oh, this was really challenging, like that came up high, that when you ask a question of, well, I don't see it here, but if they asked what are the challenges that the healthcare world is facing, those were bubbling up. But if the challenge was described as a story, it was less likely to come up. So that's where a human can discern something that the model cannot. And in fact, Kate, one of the researchers here, she was thinking, all right, next time when I do this, maybe when I hear someone tell a story about a challenge, but they haven't used the word challenge, she literally could say in the interview, like, oh, and would you say that's a challenge? And it's adding these little like verbal tags in the transcript to make it easier later. And what is the value of this? Again, there is value. I think that being able to get these quick summaries and ask direct questions of the data is going to help you, compare your progress with what it is spitting out. I think when you're swimming in lots of data and you just need to know where to look, because that's often a problem, it can help you find that. One of the ways we want to use it at SMART is we have some clients that were on our 4th, 5th, 6th project with them. And the research questions that we're asking in our current project, all of the projects before that have really valuable data for that question, but we weren't asking that question in the first project. What if we could go back and ask some of those questions and then go to those interviews and reabsorb them? And a big thing, though, to keep in mind for all of this is privacy and personally identifiable information. That all of this potential means that something has to be saved somewhere. So you have to think very consciously about how are you scrubbing the data, what could be identified and where it lives. And then sort of the don't here is that the summaries have value, there's some accuracy there, but they're not at a state or a point to substitute your own mind and analysis. So here, GenAI can be that gut check when you're swimming in information, and it can help direct you to where you can go. All right, our final experiment. This is using text to image with the hypothesis of what if we use Midjourney in an ideation session? This is going to make things visual from the get-go. For people that don't have drawing expertise or they don't know how to think through an image, this could help get them there. That was the hypothesis. So we used a mock question for this research. And it's going to land a lot better here than it did in Berlin. But the question was, how do we mitigate the rat crisis in New York City? You all have firsthand experience of that. So what I did is I pulled together at Smart Design various people who are well-versed in Midjourney. So I wanted for this test to only work with people that knew pretty well how to write a prompt rather than starting from scratch. And went through various ideation prompts of, what are ways that citizens could help mitigate the crisis? How could the government design a service? So we did the ideation in person, but we recorded everything through Miro. And off the bat, this was feeling like the wrong tool for the task. So one person, Anna, she was able to generate the most images, and I think that comes from her familiarity with the tool of Midjourney. But she was jumping into such high fidelity already that she had to, give cues in the prompt as to what style she wanted something to be in. And her reflection was like, to go straight into describing a solution that's going to give you this full image, it just did not feel natural to where her brain wanted to think about taking ideation. So we were having people go different paths. One person started with words, so he wrote a bunch of sticky notes, just thinking through what might he want to prompt, and then we went to the next round and he started to feed it through Midjourney. But everyone, you could just sense the tension of like, I have to go straight to writing a prompt. It was just not helping the situation. And what it comes down to primarily is that what it creates is not helpful for this very beginning stage of ideation when you're thinking like, what could be? So what worked well was when we had people do sketches. This is just a gestural sketch where it's talking about one element of a product or a service, and you don't have to design the whole world around it. We saw it work a bit well. Some of the people were using Midjourney as a search engine. So a colleague searched, what is the future of trash cans? And then from those images, he started to imagine what they could be. But when you're thinking about designing a service, it's particularly difficult to summarize it in a polished image. So what it's better for is for provocations where you can, the intent is to create this imaginary world that can propel you further. It's not good for creating letters or words. It also is not, it struggles to create things that maybe don't exist in its vernacular. So if it's something that might be violent in nature, it might not create what you're trying to get out of it. This prompt completely bombed, which was a laser turret firing laser beams at rats, hyper-realistic, and this does not look like that. So there are just all these ways, this was just not the tool to start with idea generation. So where I think it's better suited, and the Smarties agree, is it's an incredible tool, but let people do it solo and by themselves and think through possibilities, where we were trying to, they're all huddled around a table, and it's not what you want from ideation. They're just staring at the screen trying to figure out what to do. So if I didn't say it already, this was not the tool for this type of ideation. One thing that worked a bit better is we paired someone who did not know Midjourney with someone who was an expert, and they did this little 15-minute sort of co-ideation where they were thinking through prompts and ideas, and then he went off by himself to create some images, but it still was too early stage to jump into Midjourney. So the conclusion here, absolutely play around with Midjourney. It's a lot of fun. Doing it in real time is too much pressure to orchestrate everything that you need, but it is great for stirring up ideas and possibilities, and don't do it in real time. So we see it as Midjourney can help get those juices flowing, but not in a big high pressure moment. All right, so in summary, with thinking about synthetic users and how we can understand people's experiences, there is potential, but right now, although it has incredible answers and a lot of accuracy within it, it does not have empathy, and it is not the tool for truly understanding lived experiences. When it comes to querying documents and databases, absolutely, it understands words and can really propel the speed at which you can find information, but it lacks a lot of understanding of meaning. So it's just that red flag that you have to be mindful of. And then text to image, the way we experimented with it, it's better behind the scenes and not for real time. So how should GenAI be used in design research? Real empathy, real human empathy is still the most crucial ingredient for design research. And through these experiments, I personally believe that GenAI is a powerful tool, but it is a tool, and it is not a replacement for humans. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you. just as good the second time around. Some Q&A. We'll have some microphones going around. I have one, or Casey will have one, Barry will have one. So just raise your hand. We'll get you a mic, and make sure you're talking into the mic for the purposes of the recording. And we'll get going.
Something that I was thinking of is about like journeys. When you're designing a service and you're trying to design the journey that a user will go through, sometimes you map like different channels, different steps. And I was wondering, what about that with GenAI? What if you give them like, this is the process right now, these are all the channels, the steps, the pain points, and they can help you like reduce those pain points, increase the wow moments, maybe that kind of optimization, not creative, but optimizing.
Yeah, I think you could, if you're giving it the information that you have learned and then you're asking it to do some of that optimizing for you, I think it's worth experimenting with and with trying, but maybe with every result that it gives you, have the question of like, have I heard a real human validate that is a pain point, or this could be a solution, or is this just giving me the generalized view? Like, is this giving me what a marginalized perspective would have, or an extreme user would experience? So I think just right now, I'm trying to constantly question everything that it spits out at me, but also keep leaning into what it could help me do. Because efficiency is definitely one benefit, but I don't want to see GenAI only as efficiency. I want to think, are there ways that it can challenge me and what my bias might be coming into something? So I'm just trying to be cautious and question it, but also lean into the experimentation.
Thank you. So a lot of these LLMs have pretty serious memory limitations, and I was wondering if you started to run into any of those with the synthetic users. Like, you ask a lot of follow-up questions, and eventually it's going to kind of forget the early information that you fed it. Did you hit any of those?
I did. A few ways that I hit it, I was trying to, like, I had one transcript and I just copied and I scrubbed it, but I copied and pasted it directly into one of the tools, and it only captured some of what I had copied in there. So that was frustrating. That's where working with people that know some of the workarounds of the data limitations. So the colleague that helped use the open source API to do the big document queries, and there was like a small fee involved. Mm-hmm. He's able to think through like, okay, you want to have this much data, this is how you would do it. But starting out, that felt like a hindrance to me that I didn't want to figure out. I mean, I don't know fully what an open source API is. I know that what value it gives me, but I don't know how to set it up myself. So I think for me personally, there's some of those limitations.
And also I think with synthetic users, right, if you try to add more nuance to the user description or to add more details to make it seem a little more realistic, then you would hit those memory limits even sooner, and then you lose the ability to have a conversation. So it feels like there's a lot of trade-offs in terms of what you can do with it.
Definitely. And have you experimented with ChatGPT 4? Like, would that give you some of those extended data access?
I think it's more just generally the technology, these models, there are just really strong character limits or token limits on how much information you can pass it.
Right.
And the responses are just going to get worse if you try to break those, and a lot of these are built in where it will stop you from reaching that point. So yeah, I think that's also something that we're trying to work around.
Yeah, I think that is definitely a hindrance. So for these like sort of scrappy level experiments, I didn't run into much, but if you truly integrate it into your workflow, those would be big data questions of like, what's my token limit, and what can I do with it, for sure.
I know this is an experiment for your team. Are you guys planning on integrating it on any other parts of your process, or?
I think a lot of us are talking about it. I think document queries is one where we do see the immediate relevancy, but we're just very, very cautious about data protection. That even if we scrub identifying information, could you infer something? So I think making sure that initial thing is safe I think we do want to experiment more. And I would say that my strategy team, there's excitement, but definitely let's be careful too. And it seems unnatural to fully trust what is being spit out at you. So I think there's some hesitancy, but there is openness and excitement to seeing what's possible. And our clients are having similar questions. They want to know how it can be leveraged, and they want advice as to how can they be thinking about it and using it.
I had a client or a user actually tell me that they heard of a case where I think a company fed it, the language model, like hundreds of hours of phone calls with their customer service, and the answers they would get back from extracting that data, I think they kept it in a database or something. They said that it was like accurate. So I'm wondering if something like that would maybe translate over to the qualitative analysis. Like, say we have hundreds of hours of interviews over all the features. I mean, I don't know. Hard for security though, I don't know.
Yeah, but a customer service phone call is a dialogue like an interview is, so there's potential there. I think I'd want to learn more about how well the LLMs are sensing emotion and when they're making a joke, and you're in an interview and you can see someone stiffen up or get nervous, and those emotions are so important to understanding what their needs and how they feel are. So if it's just taking words, it is going to miss something.
Maybe a similar vein, but thinking about how you could potentially use it further down the design process, like to validate ideas or to map certain ideas to personas or user archetypes that you're building. Have you guys experimented with that at all?
We've definitely talked about it, and I think we've used it in small little moments where we haven't done a full validation, but I think we're starting to lean on it for small questions to just see, like, is this even the path that I want to take? We were in one project translating very technical language to something that needed to be layman terms, and we were like, how can it help us get there? And it felt actually like a crutch, because then we were doing so much editing of what it created for us. But I think, just with that spirit of testing, is this something that it could answer for me? Should I try it out? Are the ways that we're thinking about it.
Hi. We've been researching the potential that AI has in design research. And one of the things that we've come across repetitively is the bias that these models already have based on the previous data sets, right? Since you've done a huge series of experiments with generative AI, both LLMs and image-based AIs, have you noticed any biases that are creeping into the results?
Totally. I mean, it seems so bland. They're just giving me a laundry list of answers. Or when I was asking it some follow-up question about the smartwatch, I think you could tell it was just taking marketing language from all of the smartwatches and giving it to me. So I cannot read that statement about what an Apple Watch is and be like, this is why you buy an Apple Watch. No, it's regurgitating marketing language. So I think there's tremendous bias, which is why it can be a starting point or a general reference point, but you're missing out on so much nuance and so many important perspectives that are not represented through the regurgitation of everything that exists.
And I'm curious if during the synthetic user experiment, if you noticed there was a stereotype that Bard was creating for the user?
I think it felt like it was trying to impress me. It was like, here are all the things that I do for my health. And I was like, no, I just told you that you don't care about impressing me, basically. So it just felt like it was feeding me like, oh, I think this is what you want to know. And I was like, no, I want you to tell me that like something sucks, or I want language that feels like a human. And this was just super scannable text, which has value, but it does not have the value of understanding what someone's experience is.
Interesting. It's kind of funny how it's trying to impress you as an interviewer, which is a very human trait, but it feels kind of weird.
Yeah, I mean, like just today I was using it for something, and it took the proper noun of something that I was trying to say. So I was like, no, I mean this thing that is this physical object. And they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, let me correct this for you. So that's, I guess, naturally trying to give a personality to this. But those are some of my experiences.
Easy one. Thank you very much. I mean, I really appreciate the approach of experimenting around it rather than, theorizing it. What would be your next experiment? And connected to that, what do you think will convince clients? How would you frame the conversation with clients to start applying this?
Okay, next experiment, I think taking the synthetic user, just giving more angles to how I was testing it, because I gave 2 personalities, and then, these were some of the conclusions I made. So I think investigating that deeper and thinking about how can I go into research more prepared or with more thoughts. So I think that is where I want to experiment further. And with clients, I think there's sort of this balancing act of I want them to like get excited about new technology, but until we're super comfortable with something, I don't fully want to reveal all of the tools I'm using if they think that you're short-changing them or that you're cutting corners, because we're all just still figuring it out. So I think I don't want any alarms to ring that, we did this in a fraction of a time, therefore that's all the time you need to give us, because you still need to digest everything.
I think it's actually interesting that you mentioned time, and I was very curious, when it comes to within a project, do you feel like this actually speeds things up? Because you mentioned like there's a lot of additional steps and actually taking the time to program it and make it all happen. So is it actually helping you in a project? Does it actually speed things up?
I think it's super circumstantial of how it's speeding things up. I think to the question you asked, I'm still figuring out what to ask it. And you make that calculation in your head of like, all right, I have to get this thing done. Am I willing to like experiment on this thing that may set me back in time? I think it's figuring out what it's capable of. And then for, I think, small things where I'm like, ooh, I can go and it can like rewrite this little blurb, and that is going to help me get through this mental slump of like, I don't know what word to use, and it's immediately helping me react to something and get there. So across the board, I cannot say that like it's immediately saving me time. In some ways it's saving time, other ways it's adding time. Sometimes the added time can be helpful because it's made me reflect or think about something in a new way. So it's maybe made my quality better, but it slowed me down. So I think it depends.
And I guess a bit of a build on that too, and maybe this, of course, it's hard to say because it's still growing as a technology, but would you say that there's any task that you wouldn't trust in, and you'd be like, I trust you to, or trust the AI to do this, and take the result without then wanting to double check it, if that makes sense?
Maybe I'm thinking, what am I using it for? Like, is it a customer service email that I'm just trying to, like, I was going to avoid the task, and if it regurgitates it, I'll just send it off, and, then I can feel better. So I think the first question is, what am I using this for? Who is going to read it? And it reflects my brain and my output, so I think I'm just hesitant to immediately do anything. So I think it's like, what are the stakes, and how much do I care? Yep. Yeah. That's a good question. Is Kate still here? Maybe not. I don't know the answer to that, but 148 pages is a lot, so that does feel like a lot of time. And when I gave that one idea that a client that we've had for 5 projects, what if we could go back to everything? That would be the time it would take to scrub everything. We're reading it. We can just use our brain as something for that. So I think that's a great instance where it is not time saving, but maybe it's worth the effort to like start the pattern of having this scrubbed source so that you can reference it in the future, like thinking of your future self. But scrubbing takes a lot of deliberate thought to do that. Yeah, I'm not sure. So in this particular model, you're choosing what LLM, you say where do you want to pull from, and you start asking questions, and there might be some back and forth to establish some of your goals in your context. I didn't do it, so I don't know what that exact setup was, but I'm sure that that does have an influence because you want it to know, I'm a marketer, I'm an engineer. It is likely going to give you different answers for that. So there's a chance that they did, but I don't know the answer.
Hi, thank you for that talk. You mentioned that you can also use GenAI to challenge your own biases. So I was just wondering, like, in these experiments, if it did manage to challenge any of your own biases or give you, like, yeah, a new challenge to think about, I guess.
In these particular ones, I wasn't conscious of it challenging bias. But it might have affected something. I think if I do more of this, like I didn't have many, oh, I hadn't thought of that moments. So because I didn't have that, I wasn't aware of what it was challenging in me. It felt to be reinforcing generally what I had heard in interviews, but definitely not specifically what I had heard in interviews.
That makes sense. And then also, do you think down the line, like as an agency, you would switch from like OpenAI to like training your own chatbot or like feeding it with your own processes? Because like some like product startups are doing that, like training their own bots with their documents and then having the AI answer like customer like questions. And do you think that could be something like agencies would be?
It could be. The premise of it sounds enticing, like have this assistant that knows how I think, that knows the priorities of this project, that knows how all of these team members think. But I think the getting it to that ideal state where it's smooth and it's saving you time and it's increasing your quality and there's no data issues, that feels far away. But I think it's possible. But it feels too smooth to me. So there's that hesitation again of like, what? It's just going to have everything? That seems too easy to outsource.
Thank you.
But who knows? In a few months, maybe I'll have a different opinion.
You mentioned you gave this talk in Berlin, and you joked about the rats and said like, oh, they didn't really get the rats. Was there, and I assume it's a very international audience, was there something surprising in which that audience, like that conversation following your talk then about generative AI that you didn't expect, or?
Well, I think being in the service design setting, I had some questioning beforehand, being like, these are very elementary questions. Like, I'm speaking to a room of professionals. Am I adding value? But I think we're all at different stages of understanding and buy-in and experimentation. So I think where I was a little surprised is how many people are like, oh, that was so interesting, that was so cool. And I think there was the potential that everyone was like, yeah, this is so basic, okay. But I think for others, it is new territory. And even speaking to a bunch of people that can like speak intelligently about GenAI, when then I said like, oh, and how are you doing it? And like, oh, I don't go on it. Like I can tell you like overall what it could mean, but no, I'm not actually on it or doing anything. So I think that might have been a surprising element.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you again for the talk. Just curious. Sorry. Just curious. You mentioned like during interviews, the person who's conducting them started to verbally tag, say like, oh, that was a challenge. Are there other ways you can think of that would help set you up to use these while you're in the process? So, maybe across those 3 touch points you talked about.
Yeah. I've been experimenting a little with Zoom add-ons. Maybe you have too, where Zoom itself allows an AI summary. I was tinkering with one called Fathom, and there's moments while you're having the Zoom conversation that you can say like, take note of this, or there's these little tools that you could be tagging on the side. That would be an example of if it's a remote interview that you could sort of say, put a pin in this, I want to come back to it, or this might mean something. So I think there's some potential there. I think you need to keep practicing and experimenting to see what is possible. And also the challenge comment, she thinks that would be a good idea, but maybe it's going to feel really awkward, or you're like suddenly summarizing something for someone, and they don't want to be, summarized so quickly. So, all right, in the back.
This is super cool. Thanks for sharing. I guess I'm curious how obvious you felt like the flaws were, specifically for instance of a designer of maybe less or different experience, or even just someone at a deadline that's trying to get things done. Like, were they such a blatant thing where it wouldn't be passed, or maybe someone just who isn't a designer saying like, oh, this works and move forward? Do you think that there's a worry of that, or was the flaw so blatant you're like, yeah, no one would accept this?
Yeah, I have that worry that you could be like, well, this sounds right. Yeah, let's go with it. Could be a very easy way to go. When Kate and I were talking through the querying, she made some comment like, ooh, if someone was like running fast and trying to get through something, or is someone that doesn't have a research background, this could be very enticing to just be like, whoop, there's the answer. I've done the summary, now I can go on. So yeah, I think it's a real risk that people will take it for truth or take it for a polished thing that can be sent off. Yep.
I guess to quickly, was there any, you kind of gave the notes of how to use it, but I'm curious, were there any like consistent errors of like, you can tell someone rushed it and is using AI if you're seeing things like this, or any obvious signs?
As in, what did Kate in the summary?
Yeah, like something like, oh, this is clearly generated by a synthetic user, not an actual user.
Yeah, I think so. I think some of the syntax of what was being generated for her, she understood what it was getting at. She's like, yes, I was in that interview. Okay, yes, that is a point, but it was not a coherent thought. It was missing a little something. So I think she did sense some of that. And in using the Bard interview, there were moments of that too, or it was just this like proper language, or it was not natural. So to me, it felt obvious. And then other times, I am wowed by what it can spit out and be like, whoa, that's great. Or I love that word. That was the word I was struggling on. Now I can use that, or that turn of phrase.
Thank you.
Yeah. One more.
All of the experiments that you did seems to be based on the text, but if you can use some verbal conversation like OpenAI's new feature, do you think there would be new opportunities or difference from how you did in the text environment?
Yeah, I think being able to take in verbal data and then generate different things, I think there's a whole new realm of possibilities, because if it gets close to sensing tone, to irony, to anger, to frustration, that is a key missing piece in the text-to-text right now. So I think there is definitely more possibility with verbal. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay.
I just wanted to end on the
On
summary slide.
On the summary slide.
That's it. Thank you so much for all of the questions.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you all again for joining us. And again, thank you to Smart Design for hosting us and for the food and for welcoming us into your studio. It's a gorgeous space. So we'll have a little more networking and food and whatever else, and then we'll get on with our evening. So thank you.